German has a reputation of being quite a difficult language, but I think that's mainly because it's been understood and taught quite badly. Once we understand the value system of German, it becomes quite simple and transparent as a language. But what do I mean by value system? Languages have different things that they care about and things that they don't. This we can call the value system of the language, what the language cares about and shows in its structure and grammar and vocabulary. Some languages change to mark certain things that other languages simply ignore. German, from the perspective of rules and exceptions, can look very complicated. From the perspective of its value system, it becomes very simple and transparent. The structure of German appears to be very much geared around preventing assumptions. We don't want the listener to assume they know what we are going to say, and in the same way, we hold off interruptions that might stem from these presumptions. What's more is that German identifies situations in which you may be more vulnerable to interruption and takes steps to avoid it occurring by saving the most important information, the most key information, until last. So German seems to identify weak points where people might assume what you're saying and interrupt you. Understood or imagined in this lens, we can understand the driving force behind German and understand why we end up with certain word orders. One such time when we might be vulnerable to presumption and therefore interruption is when we use more than one verb. For example, in I want to see you tomorrow. We open with a verb, I want, we shovel everything else in the middle, you, tomorrow, and then we close with the other verb, to see. Verbs are words that we can put to in front of, to buy, to want. So what we say in German is, I want you tomorrow to see. So German identifies these occasions when we use two or more verbs as an occasion where we might be developing a bigger idea and also at the same time be vulnerable to interruption. Interruptions which are usually the result of presumptions. Usually when we interrupt somebody, it's because we presume we know what they are going to say. Often we're wrong and we interrupt that idea and the construction of the idea. German acts to avoid this. So when we have a sentence with two verbs, for example, we can avoid this occurring by saving that last verb until right at the end of the structure. Now, you might not realize the impact of this when you're building a sentence, because when you're building a sentence, you already know the idea that you're transmitting. But when you are hearing the sentence of somebody else, you really realize that until you get to the last word, you have no idea what's going on. You must hear all the details before you complete the picture. This avoids interruption unless you're very sure what's coming. So what a different resource German offers us then to communicate and piece together the information we share. This is to be enjoyed and not dreaded, and it's really fun during speaking too. You know what you're saying, you know what is the idea that you want to communicate, and you can watch it piece together in the other person that will not understand what you're saying until you put that last verb on the end. Language isn't thought. We're often asked, what language do you think in if you speak more than one language? No, this is a very common misconception. Language is a tool that we use in thought, but actually thought is something that we transcribe to language. So when we say something like, I don't want to wait here very long today, we transcribe that thought in that linear way in English. But in English, when we say, I don't want to stay, there we know what's going on. And those details then modify that reaction that occurs already on the end of, I don't want to stay. Then we modify that reaction, very long here today, whatever. But in German, you deconstruct and reconstruct that thought for the other person in a completely different way. I don't want. All of the other information then comes here, very long today, etc. And then to stay on the end, completing the picture. So let's play with this. What was to buy again?
Kaufen.
Kaufen. So starting with the simpler structures, if you were to say, I want to buy it, you have two verbs there. I want and then to buy. These are the verbs. So we start with the verb, the first verb, which is I want.
Ich will.
Ich will. And then we have to buy it. But we must finish with that to buy. So where does the it go?
Ich will es kaufen.
Bravo. Ich will es kaufen. Not I want it to buy. Not the meaning in English, I want it to buy, I want him to buy something. No, I want to buy it, I want it, and we don't complete the picture until we get to the end, to buy. I want to buy it. Ich will es kaufen. I want to buy it tomorrow. Again, you will have the second verb on the end. We're not going to understand anything about what you're talking about until we get to the end. I want to buy it tomorrow.
Ich will kaufen es.
We're not going to understand anything about what you're saying until we get to the end. So you start with one verb, you shovel everything else in the middle in the order that we've been learning until now, and then you finish with the last verb.
Ich will es morgen kaufen.
Ich will es morgen kaufen. So really, as a listener, I have no idea what idea you are deciphering for me until I get to the end. Ich will es morgen, I want it tomorrow to buy. And then I understand what's going on. That means I won't interrupt you unless I'm very, very sure on what you will say. We will explore this idea or the supposed value of German, of leaving the picture very incomplete until the end, to avoid interruptions, to avoid presumptions about what one is saying, leaving that key piece of information that's necessary to contextualize everything else until the end of the clause. We'll keep coming back to this idea of avoiding interruptions and assumptions throughout this entire course when we look at other adjustments that are made to the structure of German, which all seem to be identifying times when we are vulnerable to this possible interruption and assumption and trying to save us from that peril.